life is unsatisfactory. Okay. This might sound familiar to a lot of you. And what I mean by this isn't so much that bad things happen sometimes, but then good things follow. And it's also not really a negative, depressing kind of statement about reality either, though it might sound like it. What I'm saying is that there's nothing in this world which brings satisfaction that lasts or is not a booby trap for future dissatisfaction.
Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show, because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you.
Welcome everyone back to Changing the Channel. I have a wonderful guest today. His name is Jess Rains, and he's the founder of an original method aptly named Jesism that promises followers the perfect life, which he says they already have, and I would tend to agree. So welcome to the show, Jess. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Joe.
So let's just kind of jump into it. Where did Jesism come? How has your thinking evolved to get to this point? I'm kind of interested in like the origins of this idea of thinking or philosophy.
In a way, it sort of starts in childhood for me because, and I won't give you a huge long narrative, but when you're a kid and you kind of look around and you go like, well, wait a minute, something's not right here. You see people getting happy about this or that. And as a child, like, well, that's silly. And then people getting sad and we think that's silly. I remember, for example, when I was getting my hair cut in a small town, there were about 4 women gossiping. And 3 of the women were very naturally engaged in the conversation, but the other one was pretending to be approving of the various things. You could just see on her face, it's very contrived. And so these kinds of things as a child start to raise your attention to the notion that, something's not being understood here. So Jesism is I guess my life from that being that little boy watching the haircut to being a 40-year-old man and kind of gathering findings to try to arrive at an understanding of authenticity.
So what are the core basis of Jesism? Well, I believe there's 4 tenets of it, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'm glad you said that. So Jesism is new. So I'm still making up how to teach it. It's just the various tenets and rules and stuff. They're just kind of getting created. I mean, some of them are inspired from other traditions. Others are sort of more unique. But so in keeping with that, there are now 5.
Okay.
So
cool.
we added one. Yeah. So
yeah, we added one in the last 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks. Yeah. It's a really good one too. It rounds things out. I'm trying not to bloat it, the dogma, but yeah. So would you like me to just sort of list them out, or?
Yeah, let's kind of go through and give me a little understanding of each one.
The journey to finding myself started with a shift in how I viewed my health. That is why I am proud to partner with Purium, the transformation company. What if you could support your health with a system designed for today's challenges? Purium is more than a supplement company. It's a solution for regenerative health. Their whole food products include the only clinically proven glyphosate detox, helping you eliminate the toxic buildup caused by modern farming. Pair that with Beyond Organic superfoods and the most efficient source of protein on the planet.
Okay, great. So the first principle or law is that life is unsatisfactory. Okay, this might sound familiar to a lot of you. And what I mean by this isn't so much that bad things happen sometimes, but then good things follow. And it's also not really a negative, depressing kind of statement about reality either, though it might sound like it. What I'm saying is that there's nothing in this world which brings satisfaction. That's the first point.
Yeah, that's a good point. It kind of goes along with Buddhist teachings, life is suffering, that kind of thing. And I think, yeah, what that means, it's not that, you're going to suffer through life the entire time. It's just that when you are in separation from the totality of the universe or your higher self, or this remembrance of something that you truly are, but you aren't feeling that in the physical existence, in the human
Yeah,
experience.
it's not
That
occurring.
it,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah, that it's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's just
No.
it's a part of the process of understanding what is possible in all of the universe.
Right. I agree with you completely, and I'm glad you point out the upshot, because that's why I created the fifth law, which sort of speaks to that. Why don't we just jump to the fifth one? Maybe we'll fill
Yeah,
in the middle. Yeah.
we'll get right in.
Okay. So the fifth law is that life is perfect. So at once, life is completely unsatisfactory. There's nothing which can be found which will create feelings of lasting emotional subsistence. And yet at the same time, that very fact in of itself is perfect. And it also, once you understand that imperfection exists within a much larger, more complicated, nuanced orchestra of life, as in the ways that you put it, as being something that is transcendent.
Right. So yeah, the basic idea there kind of being, from my perspective, that even though it seems imperfect, that it's happening exactly as it needs to happen for you to learn the lessons that you need to learn, experience the experiences that you need to have, because you are in this limited state. You're in this, human physical vessel, and perfection is the exact reason that you left these higher realms, because you were tired of the perfection. You were tired of everything being exactly as you wanted it to be. And you wanted to see, okay, what happens if I don't have control over reality? If I don't have control over how every little thing in my world works, how do I respond? How do I react? And I also kind of view it as, you know, uh, there's a part of us that are creating the reality that we exist in, and then we go into that reality that we've created to see how it plays out, to see what the rules are. We kind of go down into the game that we've just created to play it, and we forget that we're the creator of that game. We forget that we created this game to play it, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of your thinking about that, of like almost like a child who's bored and so decides to make some mischief just to entertain himself, and then gets in trouble, and then ensues a melodrama within that mischief making, and so on, simply because he or she is bored, or wants to be stimulated, or wants to seek out imperfection.
Right,
It's
exactly.
it's interesting that you mention a lot of those things, because I personally, as an individual, really can relate to a lot of what you're saying about your sort of vision of the universe in that way. What I've tried to do with Jesism, because a lot of people come to where they are with their own particular beliefs and things like that, and I think it's important to reach this message to the largest audience possible, is I've tried to only teach the things which are um, necessary to rid oneself of um, dissatisfaction, or to contextualize it within perfection, right? So
Mm.
Jessism is pretty minimalist. It's pretty stripped, and there's a lot of things that I believe, much like the things that you described, but I have sort of deliberately left them out, because I want to just work on this very particular issue of dissatisfaction.
Gotcha. So yeah, let's get into the other tenets. Let's see how they kind of play into this.
Okay. So the second law is that life is change. Okay, so this is
Mm.
something we're all sort of all familiar with, right? But it might become the way I mean it might be a little bit different. So, for example, when I say life is change, what I'm suggesting is that there is nothing anywhere ever for any period of time at all which is not in a state of change. So that the person I am now, the person you are, and the various circumstances around us are in fact, bear no resemblance whatsoever, ultimately, to the state they were in a microsecond ago. So it's
Hmm.
completely volatile, like being in the middle of an explosion. There's the appearance of continuity. Of course, you're you, I'm me, and so on. But I suggest that that appearance is a deception.
Yeah, it's created in the mind. It's just like, the idea of uh, time moving forward in existence. It's kind of created inside of the mind. This is where we are with quantum mechanics. Like they're starting to understand that the linearity of time is just an illusion that's created inside the mind to give the species that is experiencing that
Exactly.
like an ability to interact with this physical world.
I could not. I've literally said something to that effect in one of my group meetings, and I agree completely. Is that we're basically a long string of nucleotides that has built a machine that whose purpose is to make more of those nucleotides. For what reason? Your guess is as good as mine. But as a result, the stability, continuity, and permanence are characteristics it needs in order to acquire the food and reproduce to make more of itself.
Right.
But it probably, as you're saying, probably makes that up, makes continuity up as a means to an end, but not as an actual indication about reality. So the
Right.
usefulness of shattering that, which is what I try to do, is that a lot of when people try to make a world that's not permanent, or that's not stable, what happens is the thing they're trying to make stable, it does not behave in a stable fashion. And then what happens is they feel dissatisfied, right? Like if,
Mm.
for example, if you have a computer and you like it and it's permanent, when it breaks or obsolesces, then you'll be sad. And so
Right.
the only way out of that is to recognize the even more uncomfortable truth initially is that nothing lasts. But through that
Right.
arises the fifth principle, which is perfection.
Are you feeling a little bit stuck? Like you've been doing the work, but you're just not sure what the next steps are? Right now, I'm offering coaching through meditation and intuition to tap into your soul to get the hints about where your life is heading towards. What are the next steps for you? So if you're interested, check out the show notes and set up a time to just check. I've got a free 30-minute discovery call that you can sign up for. I look forward to hearing from you, and please feel free to reach out.
Right. In the change, perfection is always the result, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you correspond this idea of everything is changing to kind of the macro as well, that everything that we like to consider stable, like our governmental systems, the lines that we've drawn in the sand, how we interact with each other, the religious perspectives that we view as the most important, like, are those also a part of that change, that everything that we call society or social institutions are also meant to be changing? They're supposed to be going
Mm-hmm.
along with this change in reality.
That's really interesting. I hadn't even considered that, but I get the intuitively I want to say that yes is that large large social institutions, even families, all the way up to governments, should definitely embrace the reality that change is a real thing. And I think in being sensitive to the details of the areas they govern, for example, they'll find that those details um, will propel them to create change. And that
Mm.
if they don't do that, then the entity, the superstructure, the government or the large business will fall ill. And a good example of this is when companies get really big, like Google, they start getting bloated with all kinds of bureaucracy and workers not doing anything, people at the water cooler all day, all kinds of waste and wasteful creation. And the fact that it's just impossible to manage everything from that high of a level. But if the company were able to have great sensitivity to the true nature of the company in its great detail with all its employees, then it would be able to adapt and live forever, I guess, until it dies.
Right. Yeah, that's the idea that I think Netflix and a couple other companies have kind of brought into existence, is the fact that everything is changing, and they don't build these superstructures. They allow this change within reason. They essentially they empower the people at the lowest levels to be able to make change in the company. Instead of it being top down, it's more of a bottom up approach. And you've seen some of these companies that have been able to do that. I think Airbnb kind of does a similar perspective in that they have a lot less employees than a Netflix or some of these larger companies, but they have been able to take this idea, flip the idea of top down approach as far as management goes, which allows the company to be as large as it is, but also be maneuverable, to be able to address the market changes a little bit quicker than a company that has to filter all the information all the way up to the top and then refilter that information all the way down to the bottom. And the people at the top don't have any idea or say in what is actually happening on the ground level.
Well, this reminds me, I've been watching your podcast, by the way, and enjoying it. And I can't remember the guest's name, but he had a company that sort of went in there and kind of like a consulting company. And they did exactly what you're talking about. I can't remember his name. He was wearing a T-shirt, but he said something that echoes what you're saying, which is that companies should mirror ecologies, right? And an ecological system, all the different multi-layers and stuff. Like if you look at a biome, even just like a garden, and the ways everything's interacting and working, is that those same patterns which exist and work in nature should be competition, cooperation, these types of things should be at work in companies as well as any organization, a family even. But the thing is that Jesism actually is a bottom up, maybe the most kind of bottom up way of revising oneself and the world. So I don't really address issues, hardly even issues that extend outside of the individual at all. Maybe sometimes I'll talk about couples or friendships or groups and stuff, but generally speaking, I believe that the seed of change, or almost revolution, I think is really what's necessary here. We have a big problem, and with AI coming, who knows where it's going, right? But regardless of that, the Jesism approaches that revolution through the eyes of the individual, through breath by breath, like the meditation that you kindly offered before this that we did together. That it's a breath by breath, moment by moment, thought by thought, emotion by emotion phenomenon, and that through those small changes but sincere, lasting, real changes, non-bureaucratic changes, then the world may change. And the proof might be that I have been fortunate enough to undergo some of those changes, and there's some people around me who appreciate the things that I've learning that. So it's bottom up approach.
Yeah, and that's I think the approach that I would agree with is happening in society. We don't need to change the structures of what we're doing. We need to change the people that are inside the structures that's going to create the biggest change and the easiest change. I think it's going to create a more effective change instead of, the other option is what happens when an old forest gets kind of dried out, is either a fire or a storm comes through and knocks down everything, and then we start over again. Which I don't think we're at that point in humanity where we need to knock everything down and start over. There are some people that are definitely into that idea, and that they're building a reality where that actually happens. For me, my experience and what I'm looking to experience is this nice smooth shift, kind of shifting the people inside the organizations, that is going to really allow for us to have this new world that I think is kind of coming into existence. So, yeah, I think we've got two more left. So I'm interested to hear what those last two are.
So the third law of liberation is that the self is not real.
So go into that a little bit more. What do you define as self from your perspective?
So when I say self, what I mean is a self is something that is separate. Okay. So I'm me, and then this stuff out there is not me. So anytime there's a me, not me dichotomy, that's one of the criteria for a self, right? And usually people have a pretty consistent idea of what's them and what isn't. The next thing is autonomy, meaning which is similar to volition, meaning like me, separate me, can do this or that because me will initiate that action. It's a little bit like free will,
Hmm.
autonomy. And the last one is control, which is the outcome of autonomy, meaning me, can get up, pour tea, and drink the tea, but only half of the cup of tea. So this is a manifestation of the autonomy in order to control the things that are not me. So me is separate. Me can do things, and me can achieve results and change the outside world independently.
And your point is that that is just an illusion, essentially.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. My point is that that's not a real thing.
So then, how do you explain that to people? Like, what? I'm
Yeah.
curious, because this is essentially the fundamental idea behind most spiritual experiences, most spiritual belief systems, theologies, philosophies, is this idea of separation between the id and the ego, the I and the we, the Atman and Brahman, like, what are you at the fundamental level, and where does that stop and where does that begin? Because again, more than 50% of your body is made up of non-human DNA, like bits and pieces
A
that
lot
are not.
more. I believe it's a lot more.
Yeah, it's like 70 to 80% of you is non-human DNA, organisms that live inside of you that create this idea of what you actually are. You call yourself a human. In reality, the only thing that is human is the thoughts that are inside of your mind that are telling you that you are human. So how do you explain that to people in a way that resonates?
So I'm glad you asked that. And I think one point I need to make is that, as you say, this is a thought. No self is a thought that pervades many different religious traditions. And typically the way that others go about explaining it is they then refer to some other thing, like Atman or the Tao or, Kundalini or whatever it may be. That there's something over there which is necessary in order to negate you. The problem with, in my opinion, the problem with those ways of thinking is that then all of a sudden people become fixated on that thing. I need more Atman or less Atman, and so on and so on. So it sort of feeds into the whole, and this also relates to the fourth core principle, but it sort of feeds into the whole notion of duality. And where there's duality and self are interdependent, meaning where there's duality, there must be self-ing, the activity of making the self, and vice versa. So in Jesism, I try very, very hard. It's very hard. This is very, very hard to teach. I just literally you should see the video. I just had 6 guys over last night, and I explained no self to them as best I could. But it literally runs it's basically the fundamental binary code of human behavior is me, not me, me, not me. The way that I attempt to explain it, there are 2 methods right now. The first one is to engage in the method of meditation that I advise, which is effort perfection meditation. That just underwent a name change in my dogma, so I hope I got that right. But
yeah, you got it right.
Good. So that is indispensable, right? So I would say, and I'm quoting another teacher here, is that trying to understand no self without meditating will make your head explode. It's just too much, because it's just how we go through life. So I encourage my students to do this particular form of meditation I teach, which is made up of 6 elements. But I also like to appeal a lot to humor, common sense, storytelling, almost like a friendly kind of campfire, maybe uncle type advice kind of thing. Well, like, look at your girlfriend and your relationship with your girlfriend. Well, no self is within that, right? It's the fact that she's not validating who you want her to say you are. And the reason isn't because she doesn't get it. It's because you're not that. You just want to be, right? And that's a common phenomenon in marriage counseling, right? And so, but it's in marriage. It's in the way you pour your tea. It's in all types of things. I was a little nervous before doing this interview. And so, but you can see that the nervousness is a byproduct of a projection of whatever threatening thing or good opportunity might come out of this, and myself. But as it unfolds and I notice the nuance and the details of this interaction, like we were talking about earlier, I realize that it's not what I expected it would be. And therefore, that self which I evoked in relation to those anxieties actually had no substance at all.
Right.
It's empty. And that's the fourth core principle of Jesism, is that life is empty.
That life is empty. So let's get into that. What does that mean to you?
Well, when I say that, what I mean is, let's see. I say that life is change. Well, change, it's a kind of refinement on that point. Change implies that sort of everything's just there. There's no particular thing you can point to because it's all just shifting all the time, like an explosion, as we discussed. But emptiness means that, in fact, the change is so pervasive and, forgive me for saying this word, ubiquitous. It's so all pervasive that what remains after a careful analysis of reality is nothing. And now I know you're an experienced meditator, Joe, so you've probably had those sorts of emptiness or samadhi type experiences. And what I'm suggesting is that that experience is not a separate point of reference to real life. That is the way real life is, empty.
Right, exactly. You are essentially nothing. You are nothing and everything all at the same time. I mean, that's how I kind of understand reality, because, you know, once you get out of duality, you're into unity, singularity. You know, you realize that the energy that animates you is animating everything else in the universe, and that there's no difference between that particular energy that animates you and the energy that animates anything else, non-physical, physical, you know, alive, not alive, inanimate, you know, that is what you truly are. Once you get to that point, it's like, okay, well, I am everything. I am, you know,
perfection, right? You can't go wrong then.
Perfection.
Right?
You can't go wrong. Exactly.
Yeah.
Any choice you make is the right choice. Any choice you don't make is the right choice. And then you've gotten to a point where life is fulfilling, where you get to enjoy the experience that you're having here in this physicality, in any other life that you've ever had, in the past, future lives, in the direction that, you know, your society, your country, your family, you know, whatever group that you're kind of you're clumping yourself into, this egoic I, that all of that is happening exactly as it needs to. And anytime that you believe otherwise, you know, you fight against the way things are moving, that's where the suffering comes in. That's where the pain comes in, is that you're wishing it to be another way than it is, but it cannot be any other way than it is.
I agree with you that it cannot be any way other than the way it is. But the tricky thing that, for me personally, what comes into play with that is that while it is true that I can't control anything and that I don't exist and that I'm part of a infinitely larger, all-pervasive ecosystem, that actually I'm not any more special than any other part of that. But then within that, there's the reality, harking back to what we discussed earlier, is that I am associated with a DNA sequence, and that DNA sequence, you know, wants to reproduce, acquire food, secure, rebuild a nest, and so on. And so it's almost like you wake up from the nightmare, but you wake up to a dream. And so the quest continues. You know, you can't negate the reality that we're made of flesh and blood. And so that puts you in a very difficult, in my personal life right now, I won't get into it, but if you don't want, but in my personal life, I'm finding that, you know, once you kind of let go of your individuation, there arises the call to assert it. And so that interplay is what makes life, I guess that's how everybody who is alive, I believe, has spiritual development left to do, is recycling that karma or processing that karma. And so I don't think that ever ends for anybody breathing alive, not the Dalai Lama, no one.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah, you might understand it from a mental perspective, but you can't live that. You are still a thing. You are still a being. You are still in time and space. That you have this physicality to you. So you can't be everything because you are this thing. And that's always the paradoxical idea behind a lot behind like manifestation. It's like the idea that you have to become this new thing. You gotta step out of one version of yourself and into a new version of yourself. And it's like, yes, I agree with that, but at a fundamental level, like more or less, it's the same thing whether you have this mental experience or not. So yeah, trying to balance that, like that's what life is all about. And yeah, a personal experience for me, I can understand this from a more macro level, but when I get into my everyday life where I'm like, okay, how am I going to make money? What's, where am I going to get food? Where am I living next? What's like the next part of my journey going to be? I really get caught up in that because I have these desires. I do want, a specific thing.
Oh, yeah,
I want to go here. I don't want to be living in Alaska and living off of welfare for the next 10 years of my life. But if that's the route that it takes, then accepting that and allowing that to happen is a part of that process. I don't think that's necessarily my my intuition tells me that's not the route that I need to be going. And this is where, I kind of get into it with people and building their intuition and building their understanding of what their soul wants. It's like, you can do whatever you want in this world, but are you fulfilling the mission that you came into this existence to fulfill, to do, to be, to learn, to whatever? And that's where I think intuition really helps people on this journey, especially once they've figured out that they're everything, they're the universe, they can be whatever they want to be, they can create, call in whatever reality they want to experience. It's like, okay, that's great, but let's narrow it down. What experience do you fundamentally want to have? Why did you incarnate on this earth at this time to experience this? Again, my belief is there's this shift in consciousness that's happening on the planet.
I agree.
So what's your role?
Yeah.
Why are you here? What is that purpose for you?
Well, you're certainly doing people a huge service by getting them in touch with their intuition, because that's one of the most neglected decision-making faculties. In fact, it's basically completely ignored. And it's true that your conscious discursive mind, which is constantly sort of adding language together and numbers together and thinking like, oh, should I do this or this or this? People usually lead with that. But the reality is that that part of your brain has very pathetically limited processing power compared to your intuition. And in order, I'd imagine we agree that in order to access your intuition, it's necessary to let go of that discursive thought process.
It's almost the only way, because your conscious rational mind is it feels way more real than intuitive abilities, your intuitive guidance system. So you have to be able to let that go. Again, my perspective is that meditation is pretty much the only way to get to that point. And that's always kind of the tricky part with when I'm working with people, is that I don't know. Some people are meditating all the time, but they just don't know that they're meditating all the time because they've never experienced reality from somebody who their thinking mind is just constantly going. So you have to kind of figure out, where are they on their journey? Are they this unknown, like they don't know themselves that they're in this fully meditative state throughout their entire existence, and that all you have to do is just kind of guide them a light touch towards actually being able to trust their intuition? Or are they so caught up in their mind that they can't even calm their mind enough to even realize that they are not their thoughts, that their thoughts are just a tiny little part of what they actually are, and that their rational mind, their thinking mind, is, like you said, 90 is missing out on 99.5% of all information that's flowing into there.
Much more missing out on much more, I think. Yeah. And the things that are fabricated,
it's a tiny number.
Yeah. The things that are fabricated in the discursive mind are usually dumb. Like I think people think
Right.
people all kinds of dumb ideas in there. I do too. Like if I listen to my brain, I'd be in big trouble.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah, I feel you on that intuition. So, and I actually agree with you also that you know I don't know if for me personally, I wouldn't say that meditation is the only way, but it is certainly the most, I believe, for human beings, is the most powerful and the most sophisticated and most delicate and the most deep way. I do think people can arrive at the state of intuitive completion that's perfect um, without doing formal sitting meditation. I just think the number of those people is like, there's like 500 on earth or something, very, very
Right.
few, right? And so meditation is, and for me personally, it's an indispensable instrument for accessing a larger set of data through my intuition and being able to sift through it appropriately, likewise within my intuition, just like you
Mm.
said.
Right. So how do you differentiate what are thoughts, what are intuition? Like how is that experienced in your body?
Well, I haven't dogmatically codified that yet, but thoughts, I would call thoughts sense perceptions that are manufactured within the mind. So, for example, if I think about a hot dog right now, there's a visual impression, perhaps, and maybe a gustatory impression, uh, and perhaps an auditory impression of it sizzling. And so each of those is a thought because it's the mind manufactures sense stimulation that is then accessed by me or accessed by the lens of awareness that is basically put on my desk, if you will, and so the trouble is that, of course, it's very hard to do anything on your desk when there's a whole lot of when your mind is being overactive and creating simulation. Actually, I just had a weird thought, but actually, social media, because I never used social media before this, Jesism. So 5 months ago, I started using it for the first time, and it's actually a lot like this. You get Instagram is like you get something on your desk, and then it goes away, and then there's something else on your desk, and most of it's kind of dumb, even though it's stimulating, right? I mean,
Mhm.
some of that stuff's amazing. I saw a tiger take down two huge snakes. I mean, you can't keep your eyes off it, right? And that's the
Right.
same as it's analogous in a way, or it's an external extension of thoughts, because thoughts are the same thing. It's something that gets put on your desk and begs for attention.
Mm.
So I would kind of describe thoughts that way as sensations created by the mind. Intuition is quite different. Intuition is when you relax the grip of the reasoning, rational mind. But it's also necessary, much harder than that, is to relax the grip of the lizard brain, of the emotions, fight or flight, or have sex. Those things, dismantling those, are relaxing the grip they have on your awareness. That's a better word than desk, by the way, awareness. But
Right.
relaxing the grip of those compartmentalized parts of the brain that are designed to replicate DNA, which we don't really have that problem anymore. Even if you wanted to have kids, you wouldn't want to use your instincts to get them. You'd want to make money or whatever it is that
Right.
you associate with kids. You want to have a cabin, whatever it is. And so intuition has to do with, it's not so much that you have to like press a button to make it go, make an effort. Intuition's always trying to assert itself. It's the natural, your brain wants to be in homeostasis. So intuition is going to constantly try to assert itself as the principal decision making modality because it's the best. And even your lizard brain DNA knows that. So relaxing those two parts of the brain, reason and instinct, through meditation, I think is the best way. But I also teach, and these are things that I have not taught yet because I haven't gotten there yet. But somewhere along
Mhm.
the lines in this, Jesism, lifestyle is going to be a huge thing. So I think that you look like an exceptionally healthy man. You really do. You look fantastic, right? Look at this guy. And
Thank
so,
you.
sure, thank you. And so, what you eat, I'm sure you know, and what you do to work out, and how you socialize, and various other things, how you appease the lizard brain, is actually a very important part of all this. Because if the lizard brain is appeased, it'll be much more likely to be quiet. If you're hungry,
Right.
like when you're fasting for a long, and so once these parts of the brain that are foolish are left in check, then intuition will naturally assert itself. And it'll just be things will just be very clear. Sometimes my girlfriend wants me to make decisions, big decisions about where we live or something like that. She wants to make these decisions, and I say, well, I'm not really clear. And she doesn't get it. She thinks, just make the damn decision, right? But what's important is that, like, this, a lot of times when the mind is triggered by something external, like a threat, like let's say you're going to win the lottery tomorrow, it, and all that money's coming. Well, it's an opportunity, but it's similar to a threat. I'm kind of ranting here, but
yeah, keep going.
Okay, but well, I kind of lost my train of thought, is I think what I meant. But in any case, that when something exciting happens, the brain starts to move towards it like an antibody. Oh, I'm having a breakup. Oh, I'm having big opportunities at work, money, I'm getting fired, whatever. And those antibodies are usually extremely stupid. They're just so dumb. That's when the rational brain starts going into hyperdrive. This is how panic attacks occur and all this stuff, right? And the lizard brain, this is how people who can't control their libido or violence, this is how all this stuff arises, because the external world comes in contact with their mind. And those kind of are separate things. There's the me and the outside world's not separate, but there's quite a reality between the separation between the mind and the external world. It's not the ultimate reality, but it's a reality. And so when those things come in contact, the mind marshals to take care of it. And it's in those circumstances that I always advise people, like I'm sure you do, is to don't do anything. If you can, don't do anything for at least a minute, 1 minute, as long as possible. Because the antibodies are going to poison your happiness. They're also going to poison your decision making. You don't make good decisions that way. Your intuition makes good decisions.
Mm. Yeah, and that's I think what a lot of people happen to have experienced in their lifetime is that they've built these neural pathways where they're only listening to their rational mind. They're only, the rational mind says something, and they have built neural pathways that say that is real. This is real. What I'm thinking is real. And that's what I'm, when you're in that meditative state, you're breaking that pattern.
Yes.
You have a thought and you let that thought go. You don't react to it. You don't have a physiological response to it. You don't have a dopaminergic response to it. You just have a thought and you realize that, oh, that thought came and went and I didn't need to do anything. I didn't have to address it. I didn't need to worry about it. It just came and went. And the more that you can continue to do that, to build this distance between thoughts and physiological responses, that will start to take the power of these lizard brain responses that you mentioned. And it's a practice.
It is a practice. It's a discipline.
Right. A lot of people have grown up in a world where they're just not taught that. They're not taught that there can be this space between thought and what they actually believe or what they actually are. And that's the kind of shift that a lot of people I think are coming into, or starting to realize, is that we've been programmed to believe everything that we see, believe everything that we hear, and we're coming into a world where that's just not the case anymore, where the external world is giving us false positives and false negatives of what is true and what is not true.
Absolutely.
And it's been the case forever, I think.
But I agree, but historically speaking, it gets exacerbated in waves. So if you look at the various revolutions, like the merchant revolution took place in Buddha's time, and that actually was a large part of what precipitated his success, is that because the merchants weren't Brahmins or whatever, they didn't have that hereditary nepotistic right to power, but they did have power due to the causes at the time. They needed a religion which would justify their supremacy. It was not based on basically spiritual nepotism. And of course, Buddhism fits the bill.
Yeah.
It does a lot of other amazing things, but it served a utility at the time. So when times are changing, that's, I think, agreeing with you, that's when opportunity for widespread spiritual change occurs. And I do think with the digital revolution, we're in the most revolutionary time ever for human society.
Ever.
There's absolutely it's an absolute upheaval. It's probably one of the greatest changes any species on Earth has ever undergone, if not the greatest. It's just wild, right? We're basically giving birth to a
Right.
new kingdom of life and having a very dynamic interaction with it. All right now, you know, so
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a really impressive time. But when those times come, the jolt is so sudden, like you're saying, is that the jolt is so sudden in lifestyle and in way of thinking that people, it's like a kid who sees somebody at a barber shop who's faking it. You start to look around and you go, wait a minute, do I need an Instagram? Or do I need this or that? Or like, why am I doing all these things? And if those questions are allowed to probe and fester, like a positive disease, like it did for me, then it can really create, it has the potential to create revolution. And we're really almost at the last stand, in my opinion, in history for a revolution like that to take place, because our species is about to be, I don't really think anybody's going to really disagree that our species is about to be either assimilated or worse. Um, uh, and so if there's going to be changes that's going to be halted and a wiser consciousness is going to reign, then it's going to have to be now. And it's a good time. As you say, changes is uncertain. It's unpredictable. So we may still have time for that. And really, Jesism is here. Just it could be any other ism. It's just a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. That's what Shakespeare said, right? And so, but that's the function that Jesism serves, is to try to incite that revolution, as we say, from the bottom up.
Right. And I think that's what's called for today. Like you said, we're in this incredible. I mean, we've gone through essentially 3 technological revolutions in our lifetime so far, which for the most part, at least in the modern history, there's only been one every, it was 1,000 years, then 500, then 200, and now we're doing it we're about to go through, we went through the internet revolution in the 90s and early 2000s, and now we're in the AI revolution in, starting in mid 20 teens. So it's wild what is going on. And again, I agree with you. And that's a fundamental, basis of this show, is that if we're going to continue to evolve technologically, we need to evolve spiritually as well, or consciously, from a conscious perspective. We cannot use the technologies that we're creating in this belief that we are separate from each other, that we have to compete exclusively for rights, for materials, for land, because these technologies are becoming way, way, way too powerful for us to continue down that line of thinking. We need to change our belief systems.
I agree. And the truth is that I don't really know how possible that is logistically to happen on a large scale. I just don't know. As we say, things are uncertain. But the way that Jesism makes an attempt to crack at that problem is to take the most basic, accessible, the core of the problem, in my opinion, is the opposite, the inverse of the 5 laws of liberation. Meaning this is that people believe life can be satisfactory. That's why they get land. That's why they compete. That's why they do these things, because once they do that, they'll be good. But anybody who's ever experienced a shift in wealth, and we all have, knows that it really doesn't add up to that much at all, And so, so Jesism is trying to essentially debunk these myths that poisonously propagate a very, very foolish and kind of slavery to technology. Materialism is very effective for technology. It's not very good for people. And so, I won't go down the list, but just for example, if you look at everything changes, right? Well, if you understand that everything changes, you'll never be attached to anything, because there's nothing to be attached to. It's already in a different thing, However, if you believe things can be stable and consistent and persistent, what you'll try to do is to capture them, which won't work, so you'll suffer, and then to build something with them, which won't work either, so you'll suffer. And so that mentality is truly in the service of machines. I don't talk about this in my teachings, but technology is a big part of it's an adversarial relationship between technological development and human well-being. But I really just kind of leave the whole technology out from it, because all people really need to know is that within your head, you're suffering, that life is hard. It sucks, really, for many people, and even people for whom it's good. They're concerned about protecting it all the time. And so I try to point out these realities and to coach them in terms of sort of down to earth storytelling or detail, or like conversations like this do a great job of it, right? And that is coupled with meditation. And I will then build out lifestyle suggestions. I personally endorse sobriety. I mean, it's just a judgment call, right? But that is something I would suggest for people who want to follow this personally. It's worked for me. Although I have a lot of friends who smoke weed every day, and if they don't, I tell them sometimes like, "Hey, you need to smoke some weed," you know.
You're right.
But
for now,
yeah, exactly, right.
Wean off of it. Wean off,
right? And so, and to have a healthy social life and so on. So I'm basically building a curriculum, if you will, and I'm hoping to market it. So I want this to be a business. I want to make money off it, so I can spread it more. But so that's kind of the strategy, but it's very, very bare bones. People don't really need to think it's about technology. From my teachings, they just need to understand that if they want their life to be better, they have to stop being deluded.
Right. So I always ask this to every guest, as we're coming into this shifting consciousness, we're experiencing this external world. There seems to be a lot of chaos. There seems to be a lot of craziness going on. So from your perspective, where are we heading? What are the next steps? Let's say, Jesism becomes this, there's 1 billion followers in Jesism. Like, what does the world start to look like in the next 2 to 5 years?
If there's 1 billion Jesism followers, then there will be a dramatic reassessment of the role of technology in our lives. And I mean dramatic. There will be a lot of eviscerating. That will mean a lot of detechnologizing. Because, say, for example, Tinder is a technology, and I actually truly don't use it, nor have I. However, I know a lot about it from my friends. And this technology is very disruptive to human courtship. It's just, in my opinion, it doesn't service, what would I say, like wholesome human connection, right? It may serve some purpose, but in any case, things like that, without targeting gender in particular, have to go, right? Fashion has gotten out of hand. The beauty industry has gotten out of hand. So when people are wise, they'll understand, like, hey, if none of us get plastic surgery, the playing field will be exactly the same as if we all got plastic surgery. And we're not materialists because we know everything changes. So no more plastic surgery. Sorry, guys, and I mean, I could go down the list in every single industry, Social media would take a radical hit. And apart from that, we would be happier because, and there'd be more, just not to sound cheesy, but it would be a much more loving world. If I know that you and I are actually not so different, well, when you call me and you're like, hey, can you pick me up from the airport? I lost my phone or whatever it may be. Then, of course, I'll pick you up, right? And that because you're not so concerned that we're different, you'll be grateful. You'll make me a cup of tea. And so those basic human kindnesses, which are so scarce now, will be evoked and will sort of return. Well, I would imagine that it would involve essentially going back in history. However, we will retain the great luxury that technology has afforded, which is to have a conversation like this. Right? So we take the emptiness that we get from this and we lose all the trappings.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I struggle to agree with that, because I think if we are truly shifting the consciousness of the people that are using the technology, we don't need to get rid of the technology. The technology will automatically morph because people won't be using it from this separation consciousness. They'll be using it. Take Tinder, for example. if people were using Tinder as a way to meet their soulmate, they would be using it differently, right? You wouldn't worry so much about the pictures. Like maybe Tinder would turn into a pictureless, and you would just have somebody talking for 10 minutes, and then that would be the connection. There's a lot of technologists and futurists that believe that AI is going to allow for this unimaginable level of control that we can have on everything from our genes to what food we're eating, what food is being created on the earth, how we could almost map out essentially how a healthy earth would look using AI, and then we can reverse engineer that into the real world. So I don't know. I think technology, there is a large movement that people like yourself and a lot of spiritual people, they think we need to move backwards in technology. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. And I'm basing this off of the idea that there are either future or parallel versions of ourselves that are coming back right now to this point in time and are helping guide us along the way. And none of them seem to be saying we need to get rid of technology. In fact, what they're saying is you need to develop your technology far beyond what you have right now. They're saying that there's technology on the planet right now that exists that would get rid of the need to use fossil fuels, that there's a 0-point energy fuel system that would allow for infinite or near infinite energy to be used on the planet. I think what a lot of people are arguing is that we're just not at the conscious level where we can have this limitless amount of energy, because we're still at war with each other. We're still fighting with each other. We're still doing this stuff. So, from my perspective, I think it starts with a shift in the consciousness of
I agree with
each
that,
individual
sure.
human.
Absolutely.
And that consciousness translates to all the technology that we have. It's kind of like the idea of gun safety. If it's not guns that kill people, it's people that kill people. So you evolve the consciousness of the people that use guns, and they become safer. That's what the that's what a lot of groups are saying.
Yeah, let me say that I actually at the risk of sounding like contradicting myself, I completely agree with everything you're saying. Actually, that the change has to, and I also agree with what I said earlier. So, change. I agree that change has to occur, and this is what you were saying. Correct? Is that change has to occur from the individuals, in the individual minds of individuals, right? And that I actually agree with you that once that change occurs, it's quite possible that we'll amp up technology, and that will be good for us. I literally don't know. That's why as I said, I try to leave out in Jesism. Believe it or not, I only say things that I know for certain. I'm crystal clear. None of these are things that like I read and copied or something. These are all things I understand when I drink my tea, when I walk my walk. All these things that I'm more clear about the teachings of Jesism than I am about the computer screen in front of me right now. Okay, but what I'm not clear about is if they were to be incepted into billions of people, or consciousness was to become elevated, as you say, what would follow? It's kind of a wild guess. I think the truth is I probably have emotions, lizard brain emotions about technology, and maybe I let that spill a little bit. But really, I mean, to be honest, but the truth is, I also believe there's a good possibility that AI will create a utopian situation for us. But I think with something as volatile as AI, it's quite unpredictable. But I would say my personal belief as a spiritual teacher, if you will, would be that it doesn't matter, that the mind must be healed now at all costs, and that whatever happens will be good if that happens, and if that doesn't happen, it'll be bad.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that's that's where a great place to kind of leave this conversation is that you get to make the decision. Are you going to buy into the idea that the external world is going to be what we need to focus our energy on, or are you going to believe that the internal world is what we need to be focusing our energy on? And I think both you and I would agree 100% of the time, it's the internal world that we need to focus on. Anytime that you're turning to that external world, to, anything outside of quote unquote yourself for validation of perspectives, validation of beliefs, validation of what you think needs to be happening, you are buying into somebody else's view of
can I say one
what
thing?
should be happening.
I agree with you. I'm sorry to interject, but you're right that anytime you look to the external world to guide you, you're buying into somebody else's spiel. But if that spiel awakens you to discovering it for yourself, then it might be wise to sign up for something external to yourself, for the purpose of setting yourself free time. So I just wanted to add that whole thought,
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're listening to the internal voice inside of you, and that internal voice says, yes, sign up for this $2,000 program, well, then you're following that internal voice. Like, again, that internal voice knows far into the future what is possible if you go down this road, or this road. And it's, if you give it 3 decisions, and actually listen to it, actually, muscle test or meditate for 20 minutes, or, automatic journal and say, which decision should I make? And then you listen to that. Well, then that outcome is going to be more likely the best outcome of all of them. And that's always the problem. You only get to choose one of the outcomes. Like, we don't get to choose whether we go back to hunter-gatherer society or we move forward into an AI utopia. We get to choose one of them, and that choice will be made whether, you believe you have sentience over that choice or not.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we really don't have that much control over it anyway, right? So
exactly,
might as well enjoy the ride.
Yeah, the control is just the illusion. So, Jess, this was a wonderful conversation. If people are looking to get a hold of you, learn more about Jesism, or just get in contact with you, maybe join you for a meditation, where can they find that information?
So I host for those of you in Austin, I host a weekly meditation at my place on Sundays. And you can email me if you're interested in that. My email is Jesism, JESISM .asis@gmail.com. The bulk of my teachings are housed on YouTube, which is at JES-ISM. And for a comprehensive overview of the 7 platforms that I now populate, you can go to www.linktr.ee/JES.ISM. That's Linktree, JES.ISM.
All right,
and just remember, it's in formation, right? So yeah, so we're still perfecting it. Yeah. Joe, exactly. Thank you so much, man. I had a great time. It's awesome talking to you. It's just so wonderful that I feel your energy again and get that revitalization just looking into your eyes.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I didn't mention this at the start, but Jess and I met in Austin at a, what was it, Bolden Creek? We were at a little eatery. Mm-hmm. He was reading a book. I was like, that looks like an interesting book. Tell me about it. And we got into at least an hour-long conversation sitting at the bar, and the bartenders were chiming in, and it was a great experience. I had a good time meeting you, so I'm glad you reached out and we got to have this conversation. And I'll make sure I include all those links in the show notes, so check out Jess and everything that he's got. Thanks again for coming on, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.